On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues, and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy.
So what's in today's show, Mr. John?
Well, Hannes, we've got a particularly impressive show for you this week. We go back to our old friend, Neil Nixon, who lives somewhere in darkest Kent, and we are talking about all sorts of esoteric things, including the real reason that humanity needs mysteries. And we go to Canada, where CFZ Canada Supremo Dave Scott meets one of Canada's leading Bigfoot researchers. Jolly good stuff, eh?
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. Just in case you wonder what I'm doing, this is a neck massager, which I know sounds impossibly unsalubrious, but it is for my arthritis in my neck, which is giving me a hell of a lot of grip at the moment. And this thing, which only cost me 17 quid on eBay, is remarkably good. Trouble is, it takes up an awful lot of room, and it makes my corner of my sitting room, which has become my little studio, even more messy than it usually is. As if I didn't have enough. Oh, come here, you stupid dog. Yay, good boy. Yes, he gets up. If I didn't have enough problems with a little dog called Archibald jumping up and down on my neck and everywhere else. So, apart from all that, hello, my name's John Downs. I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for... What's happening over there, Archibald? I think something strange is going on.
Oh, Barry, I got some very exciting information of things what is going on. Oh, yes, that's down at the old Youth Outreach Centre in Brixton. Oh, yes, it is. Now, you remember the Children's Film Foundation? Yeah, I remember the Children's Film Foundation. Yeah, they make all of them films in the late 50s, the 60s, and they did the 1970s with all the kids. Well, we're doing it again. It's going to be reinvigorated and brought back the Children's Film Foundation, and we're doing it with the kids from the Brixton Youth Outreach Centre. That's what we're doing. Oh yeah, and what's your first film going to be? It's going to be the Fred and Rose West story.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, my name's John Downs. I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and have been for the last 31 years. And every Wednesday afternoon, evening really, every Wednesday evening at 6:30 for about a quarter of an hour, and every Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock for about half an hour, I bring you all a miscellany, a mishmash, all sorts of other things beginning with M, of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, I think we'd better ask him.
Hello, I'm Perkin Warbeck and I haven't a clue what you're talking about.
First of all, we're going over to Canada, where the head honcho of CFZ Canada, Dave Scott, has been talking to one of Canada's leading Bigfoot researchers.
I'm with Robyn Moonshadow, who is a professional tracker, professional cryptozoologist in Canada, one of the more active ones that I've met, which is really nice because she has a lot of information to share, and she's very open, kind. She's been tracking since she is 9 years old, and she's been in cryptozoology since she was 5. So, let me see, you're 20 now, right? So 11 years. Okay.
Well, you know, with us, you never can tell.
Yeah, you owe me a quarter now. So, just remember, I'm actually older than Jonathan.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm 2 years older than Jonathan, believe it or not.
Well, age is just a number.
I did have the beard and everything going. I was going to get a lounging chair and pretend I was John for this interview, but I went, nah, I better be myself. I just didn't.
A lazy boy would be better. A lazy boy would be better.
That would be awesome, yeah. I don't have room for that in my living room. We've got big couch and a little couch, and then the girls are doing crafts right now, so we got all the tables out. Actually, I stole one. So Robyn has been doing quite a bit of field research this year, and she's going to share some of her recent adventures and fill us in on our past. So Robyn, I'm going to give you the microphone and let you go.
Well, I go on quite a few trips to different locations every year. I try to go on 3, sometimes 4 if I can manage it, but it's usually 3, and I travel all over. And for the past 5 years, I've been going to the States because there's a lot of cryptids there to look about, and especially Bigfoot. Now, I do have Bigfoot here, but there's a bit of a difference in behavior that I find. The ones that are here are very, very elusive. Like all Bigfoot are elusive to a certain extent, but then sometimes you get ones that are a bit more bolder in the States where they don't seem to care. They're still sneaky and they don't want you to catch them, but they're not as careful as, say, the ones that are here, because they'll leave footprints. They don't care. Because, well, I have no doubt they think that as human beings, we ain't that right. And to some certain extent, they are right. I mean, we can't catch one. We can get evidence, some good evidence, but we can't catch one yet. So recently I was down on a gentleman's property in Virginia, and he's been having some Bigfoot activity there for about 3 years. And he wasn't sure to contact about it, and he contacted a friend of mine. And they'd been down a couple of times and got some interesting things. And for this trip, I said, okay, well, I'll go down and let's see what we can find. And sure enough, he's got Bigfoot activity around his property, that's for sure. Get there the first day down, we took a stroll down towards his field that he has, and this is his house. It's more like a cottage where he can go and get away from everything, but he does have a separate house. So we're just walking, and right in the middle of this pathway is a big track, a nice big 18-inch track. So I casted that, and I have a picture of it right here. I hope everybody can see that.
Oh, that's huge.
It's a nice big male. I know not everybody says, you can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference. Males and females walk very different. And this is a nice big male. And there was some commotion during the night, and we're never sure. And we had the FLIRs going, and my research partner for the States got a very good video of a Bigfoot walking through the yard. I'm trying to get him to share it. He's not ready to share it yet because of we had another friend of ours who was on a television show, and they called him a fake and a hoaxer. And to know this gentleman, he doesn't do things like that. And it's kind of soured him for Bigfoot research. So he's afraid of that there. But I'm trying. It's a very good video. It's a FLIR, so it's in shadow, but it's very good video. And the next day after all this happened, I go out to look for tracks, and I did find a juvenile track. It was too shallow to cast, but it was there. And this is the second time that I've seen a juvenile with a male, so they must co-parent. And they do things like this. They'll walk in each other's tracks as well. I've seen that quite a few times, which I always think is really fascinating because they're covering each other's tracks. Now, up here in Canada, we do that when we walk in the snow. So the tallest or the biggest person goes first through the snow, and then the rest of us follow in those tracks. It just makes walking easier. So it's really, really neat to see this. And even if there's no snow on the ground, we've seen this. I've seen that here in Ontario, and I've seen that multiple times in the States when I was down there tracking a Bigfoot. And it, like I said, it doesn't even have to be in the snow. They just must do this to hide each other's tracks. Fascinating. We've found some possible bedding areas. Not anything fancy, but just where something was lying down and purposefully put bedding material on the ground. The weirdest thing that I've seen is it was bamboo that was woven together. Of course, you could say, well, a hunter did this. Of course, you could say that. But it was a very remote location. It was a very odd thing to see. One year in Dillard, Georgia, there was 3 of us. And this is in one of my videos. We heard the strangest noise. I mean, we get into this place and we park and get our equipment out and we start walking. And we got a wood knock. And to me, they would knock for communications. And it's always 2 wood knocks, except for another occasion, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we'll hear 2 wood knocks off this way, and then we'll hear another 2 wood knocks over this way. Oh, well, they're here. This is what they said. They just told each other we're here. And then we started hearing this weird noise. It sounded almost like a monkey. Okay, well, there's no monkeys in Georgia. Again, it's in the States. And it was and we're all looking around, and I go up to a tree and I think, well, it's not a squeaky tree because it's not going to stop because I'm standing there. The dog also heard this, and we're looking around. We're all hearing this. A friend of ours is a professional hunter, of course. He doesn't know what that is. And he, like me, he's heard all kinds of noises. He doesn't know what this is. Either he's never heard anything like it, and neither had I. And I've been around all kinds of animals all my life. And we're sitting there listening, we're standing there listening to this noise. And through the dense tree cover that's around us in this location, we get in what I can only assume would be like a mock charge. And running around, and we're thinking for a minute it might be a hog and looking for a tree to get up, because they do have wild hogs there, and the only way to get away from them is go up a tree. And it didn't come out. It just kind of, and off it went. And then we heard the noise a couple times again, and it went quiet. We don't know what it was. Okay, so we move on. And we see some pig wallers and things like this here, which are interesting too. And Tim's like, what's that? And we didn't catch it, but he said it was like there was a small monkey in the tree way up in the canopy. So we go over to this tree to see, and off to the right, there was this commotion again, and then everything went quiet. So we do wonder if Tim caught sight of a juvenile Bigfoot, and maybe the juvenile Bigfoot was crying for its mommy or daddy. So we don't know. We just assumed that. So when I got back here to Canada, I was analyzing these noises, and the closest that we could find to it was a macaque distress call. The year after that, we were at another location up on the mountain, and we decided to have a setup, which is sitting up all night in the dark to see what's going to happen. Because they get curious sometimes and come around and want to watch the people, like as much as people want to watch them. And it was about, 1, 2 in the morning. And we heard a wood knock far off in the distance. I should give you the location first. It's on a mountain, and there's a road near where the campsite is. And then there's a hill. And where our camp was situated, it's just a path, and then you go way back into the woods. Thick laurels everywhere, and it's very thick, and it's foggy. The whole place was foggy all the time. I was hoping for like a gorilla in the mist moment. It didn't happen, but that's how thick the fog was. It wasn't too bad during the day, but it was still misty. And like I said, at night, the fog was really, really bad. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. So we hear this wood knock off to the right from across the road. Oh, and sometimes you think, well, maybe that's all we're going to get. And then another wood knock and another wood knock. And it was getting closer and closer. And a very loud wood knock that was just on the other side of the road. And because any Bigfoot stuff is like gold. And then it went quiet. And there's a bit of a shuffle. Like, and we do have trail cameras out. Maybe we're going to get something on the trail camera. And then off to the right, the wood knock. Not 2 seconds later, another wood knock from off to the left. They were coming across the road, wood knocking, as soon as they got across the road into a safe location. And this went on 9 different times. So one would knock to the left, then it'd go quiet, then there was a wood knock to the right. And this went on 9 times. And I'm sitting in the tent. I wanted to go out so badly, even in that fog, but I knew as soon as I opened the zipper of the tent, that would be the end of all of it, because they're so cautious. So after the 9th time, we're waiting, and all of a sudden you hear all kinds of wood knocks off to the right down into the woods. Because it was so foggy, they must not have been able to see. And I'm listening to all this, trying to figure out what they're possibly doing. They're hunting, but they are communicating by wood knocking because they can't see in the fog either. But it just went on and on and on, and we will listen to it until we couldn't hear it no more. But just 2 wood knocks, knock, 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 knock. And it was all over the place back in there. And at some point, they must have found each other, because it all went quiet after a while. It was just amazing. That actually, I have to say, was one of the most amazing experiences. Now, they didn't walk in the mud, of course. They walked in the grass. There was impressions, but no foot tracks, and we didn't get anything on our trail cameras.
No.
They see them, and they bypass them. But we do have all these wood knocks recorded. So they couldn't get away sneaking around and not getting recorded for that, but it was amazing. Now, the grass patch that they walked on was maybe 30 feet from the tent. Like I said, I wanted to go out so badly, but you get even small things. Well, I wouldn't think that's small to me, but even things like that, you get kinds of information from, like the tracks. With tracks, like I said, a few times I've seen a juvenile with a male, so they must co-parent. I mean, for us, well, the kid's off with dad. So the kid is off with dad. I mean, just as much with mom and dad. So even something as small as a track, for some people, it's a Bigfoot track, no big deal. But the circumstances of how you find the track and you track it and you follow them around just to see what they're up to can give you a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
There are times I hate being an editor and having to cut things in the middle of such a fascinating conversation. But we will be back with Dave Scott and Robyn Moonshadow next week. But now, And now I'm very happy to bring another old friend of mine back onto the show. I've known Neil Nixon since the early 1990s, and we have much the same taste in music, much the same range of esoteric interests, and he is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met who deals with UFOs. He's got a new book out now about why the human race needs mysteries. So Neil, it's lovely to have you back. Tell me, you've got a new book
Right.
doing, haven't you?
Yeah, I had one out earlier this year called Why Mystery Matters, which I would have to say at the outset is a co-authorship. So let's give some credit to E.K. Knight, who's a dark fantasy author. I'm the half of the partnership that gets out and actually talks about it and does the kind of factual bit, but EK helped me with it, if only because the stuff in there about working as a fantasy author and drawing from that kind of thing, they're an expert on and I'm not. But yeah, basically it's just about why we would all benefit from engaging with mystery, as in genuine mystery, not mystery like detective fiction, but mystery like the kind of mystery that you engage with cryptozoology, and I've spent a lifetime engaging with mainly through ufology. And it's about that really. So it looks at the history of it. It looks at how in the right ways we can harness the power of mystery and what it offers us. And then it looks at how there's a section called the War on Mystery. And no, I mean, obviously nobody's declared war on mystery, but by that, I mean the way that things like the internet puts us into silos and tries to drive us to things that look like answers. So it's not really encouraging us to think deeply or to think for a very long time about a subject. It's encouraging us to come to very quick answers. And I'm out doing I do live talks on this, which means that I've got a basic talk on it, which has gone quite well to sometimes the people that you would least suspect want to book it. So this time next week, I'm doing I'm on a thing called Restless Events, which is a little bit like like an online thing like Saga or something for retired people, and they want it. So I'm quite looking forward to that. But by the same token, I'm talking to paranormal groups about it as well, which is great.
So why do we need mystery?
Well, there's no evidence that we ever didn't need it. So we need it because it addresses something that's fundamental to being human. I mean, that's I could blather on about it at great length, but the things I say in a sort of simple 1 hour talk are that, first of all, there is absolutely no evidence that humanity existed at a time before we were engaging with the mysterious. And the evidence for that is that some of the oldest artifacts and oldest evidence of human settlement that we can find clearly has mysterious elements. So it's highly disputed, but there's an object called the Venus of the Barakat Ram, which is, depending on your view of it, it's either a carved rock that is made in the form of an earth goddess, in which case, if this is true, then it's at least 250,000 years old and possibly up to 30,000 years older than that. It was found on the Golan Heights in Israel in that's found on the Golan Heights, which is presently in Israel, in 1981. And I mean, okay, the other school of thought about the Venus of the Barakat Ram is that it's just a rock. But on the other hand, way before we had detailed recorded history, we had things like the Lascaux cave paintings, which just the sheer practicalities of those, i.e. they were created in caves way underground. They clearly had some huge significance to the society that made them, and just the sheer effort of actually making them and then taking people down there to see them suggests that there was something of huge significance, possibly mystical, that was being enacted there. So we need it because it's part of who we are. Our brains are literally wired up to create uncanny experiences. And if you just take a very secular view of that, not long ago I read there's a fantastic book called This Is Your Brain on Music, which more or less explains how our brains give us the experiences we get when listening to music. And again, we are hardwired for this stuff. We're hardwired for those transcendental experiences. So we need it for that reason, and we need it because it's probably the biggest stretch in terms of our imaginative thinking when we engage with something that both matters to us and we can't explain it. Now, beyond that, I mean, the individual mysteries clearly are up to people for, in terms of they'll pick the ones that are most meaningful to them. But there's no evidence that we've ever existed before we needed it, and we certainly still need it at the moment.
I had never thought about that. That's a very, very interesting concept.
Well, if you think, we've collided and crossed paths since the late 80s or early 90s. We can never quite remember, can we? But it would be sometime around there. If you didn't rub shoulders at a UFO conference, which would have been my comfort zone and yours a little bit in the late 80s, then it was certainly by the early 90s when people at 40 and Times were doing stuff. And I think what's brought me to this, considering almost like the meta thing about why it all matters, is that in that time that we've been colliding and crossing paths, I've become very conscious that a lot of the things that pass for investigation in the areas that we tend to divide our paranormal investigations into, they just keep repeating some of the same old tropes. So, I mean, to do with ufology, one of the biggest events this year, I know we were talking about this just before we started filming, but David Grush's testimony to Congress this year in the United States, on the one hand, was spectacular and it got worldwide news coverage. On the other hand, if you've been around ufology as long as me, the second you mentioned Mussolini's UFO and the whole thing about this crash saucer in the 1930s, your heart just sinks. You know, it's like, no, that story actually comes from the mid-1990s, and I could blather on about it, or I could say that if you go and have a look at the recent Skeptoid podcasts, it's pretty much all explained in there. And the two things that matter to this brief conversation are that the original documents that made some people believe that appeared in the mid-1990s and so resembled the way that the MJ12 documents, the infamous MJ12 documents, appeared, that it was just repeating a certain pattern in ufology. And secondly, another big pattern in ufology that drives that particular Mussolini story is that you've got one person who has embellished it very, very vividly, but for various reasons, you might not necessarily trust them. I mean, in that case, it's a guy called William Brophy Jr., who has spoken about individual UFO cases, and he tends to draw on, as he puts it, conversations he had with his dad, who had high security clearance. His dad is conveniently dead. William Brophy seems to be able to just leap on any UFO tale. And for me, when this keeps happening and you think, well, here we go again, it's another holy grail that's just going to shatter in front of us, it's increasingly disappointing just to keep following that. But on the other hand, I cannot deny the other thing that happens to me all the time when I'm doing live talks, which is that if I'm finished talking about UFOs or the mystery one now, or any variant of those, often people will come up and share the strangest thing that ever happened to them, and they don't want publicity, and they often don't want me to take these stories and go and share them with a group like ASAP or something. More than anything, they just want to be heard, and they want to have a sense that somebody talking to them might actually sympathize and understand. And I can't deny that there is mystery, and we keep having the most uncanny experiences as human beings. I can deny, I think, that a lot of the trite answers that have been coming up for years that have followed the same patterns are actually good explanations, because there is a history in my area, certainly in ufology, of these fantastic cases coming along, being very, very prominent for a while, and then just crashing and burning in front of people. So I've got much more interested in the kind of deeper thing in the last few years as I've sort of come back to this and started rubbing shoulders with people at conferences and stuff.
As you describe the need that people have to be able to share their experience and talk to someone who is going to listen to them, you know what that sounds like, don't you?
Sorry?
You know what that sounds like, don't you?
You know what? I'm turning you up, John, just the third time.
It sounds like a secular version of confession.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Bless me, Neil, I have sinned.
You've told me a few stories. I totally agree with that. But yes, it is. I don't know. I wouldn't stop at confession, actually, John. I mean, first of all, I don't think people are confessing as so much as trying to understand and realizing in doing that their own understanding is very limited. So it's interesting you should mention that. I'm working on something at the moment, and almost one thing I love about just being back in this business and hanging out with people is that sometimes you just have conversations and ideas come up. And I'm doing a piece at the moment for Anomaly, which is the annual sort of serious academic style publication that ASAP do every year, and it's actually on whether the existence or otherwise of God is the ultimate anomalous phenomena, which in a very practical way basically means, is all of this just about us interacting with things we can't understand and searching for some kind of meaning of life? And it does sound very much like that, John, but it's become clearer to me in the last few years, because I timed it very badly, but I went back to sort of doing live talks on the paranormal. I actually put them up online and stuff in the early months of 2020. So I literally got one UFO talking to a local Rotary group, and then the Wilderness Dog locked down, didn't they? Which so all that effort was on hold for the best part of a year. And it's just been very clear to me since I've got back to this that I'm talking to people who have experiences that change their lives, and they're on a par with, say, having an accident, like a car accident or something. And I don't know what the answers are, but that bit of it, just the sheer diversity and the power of these experiences over people is unarguable. And the easy explanations don't catch all the experiences that people tell me or other people, and they're not, they don't fit the kind of models. I mean, most people who present, and I'm assuming it's possibly the same even with cryptozoology, that most people who present didn't go looking for the experiences, were changed slightly by them when they happened, and are not particularly comfortable with being in the public gaze when they're talking about them.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly say that some of the experiences I've had have changed me. And going back to confession for a moment, I've been thinking for years that basically Roman Catholic confession and cognitive behavior therapy are pretty well the same thing.
Yeah, I'm married to a psychotherapist who doesn't work with CBT, so she's an ITA psychotherapist, and okay, there's other stuff, but it's about transactional analysis, basically about the transactions in people's lives. Yeah, absolutely. And those ways of approaching things do change lives. I mean, they don't always change every single life that's trying to change in the way it wants to change, but there's proven track record about how those things work. I'm not sure with the paranormal stuff. I'm not sure. If you were to take it at the most ambitious way of looking at it, it's almost like there is some higher intelligence tries to reach us and does so in such a cack-handed way because our ability to understand is very limited. And I've no idea. I mean, I think, as my father-in-law would have said, it'll see us out. Yeah, I don't expect to see in this lifetime, and I'm not totally convinced that there's another one, but it's certainly there's a lifetime of lateral thinking here. And I think you're right about the things we've learned about human behavior and how we can change it. But I think the other side of it is that some of the stranger experiences that people report and how they might be coming about are still way beyond us. I mean, I've been banging on about this for a while now, but if we go back to that mystery book, I try and explain this at the start by dragging something in that a lot of people would probably know, that at the beginning of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I'm not the biggest Douglas Adams fan, but at the beginning of that, one of the most famous jokes in it is this whole thing about the answer to the ultimate question. Yeah. So they're in the book, I think they're described as super intelligent pan-galactic beings or something like that. And they build this computer called Deep Thought because they want to know what the answer to the ultimate question is, life, the universe, and everything. And the computer tells them, but the answer is 42, which I'm sure you remember that from back in the day. But it's often forgotten then what happens afterwards, which is that the computer then says, well, if you don't mind me intervening, you didn't ask a very good question. Actually, you're only going to answer the question. You're only going to get the answer to the question that you've asked, and you didn't ask a very good question. And then that leads to a whole great joke in the whole series about the fact that the computer helps them to design a better computer, and that computer is the Earth and everything on it. And it's working its way towards the answer, but then the Vogons turn up and demolish the planet to make way for a bypass. So effectively, the answer to everything that we need to know is demolished in favor of improving the traffic system. And my take on it, and this is explained in the book, is that if I've got a strong opinion here, it's that we're not even in a position to ask the right questions in a lot of cases now. We can't even form them, if you like. It's not, we don't sometimes understand what we're looking at. So we interpret it in terms of these paranormal phenomena that fit into certain models, which lend themselves to documentaries and books and feed in the same audience time and time again. And I think there's way more than that if you start to link these things up, which is why that whole mystery thing is a way of just addressing that in a simple form.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And there's the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little house, will tell you. Don't forget to ring the notification bell, otherwise you won't be told when the next episode's gonna be. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to say a big thank you to my producer Louis, who is still gallivanting around the colonies pretending to be a cowboy, and to my guests this week, who've been Dave Scott, Robyn Moonshadow and Neil Nixon, all three of whom will be back here next week. I'm going to be back on Wednesday. What are we going to be talking about on Wednesday? Well, I have got another old friend of the show staying with us at the moment. So, can you see him? He's there in the corner. It's Richard Muirhead. And so we're going to be looking at the new edition of Flying Snake, and we're going to be doing some other odds and sods while he's down here. So that's what's happening on Wednesday. Next Saturday, as I've already told you, we revisit the same subjects we're talking about this week, or rather we continue with the subjects we're talking about this week. And so, if you are all going to be there, Mr. McCrimmon, I am talking to you. If you're all going to be there watching the show, and I'm going to be there doing the live chat and all the other stuff that I always do, then I'll be seeing you.